Welcome to another conversation, the Black Male Impact. My name is Richard A. Cross, and today we have with us Dr. Belay Reddick. And before we start the conversation, before I start asking questions, Dr. Reddick is an emotional learning advocate who specializes in improving classroom behavior, increasing academic achievement, leadership workshops, coaching, individual and group mentoring. Dr. Reddick, thanks for being here with us. And I would like to have you, share something about yourself. You don't have to give away everything because I know the conversation will gather some of that information, but please share something about you. Then we get into the conversation.
Certainly. Let me start off by saying thank you very much for giving me the invitation, Dr. Cross, to be a part of this wonderful experiment that you are undertaking. I think is worthy. And so I want to commend you for that.
Thank you.
So again, I'm Dr. Belay Reddick. And for starters, I would like to say I'm a Jacksonville Jaguar fan. We don't have a win this season, but I'm from Jacksonville. I'm a Florida boy. So I'm committed to the Jaguars. You mentioned about my passion for working with young Black men. It's something that I enjoy doing. But I'm also a father. I'm also a husband. I'm also a grandfather. I'm also a community leader. So the work that I do is the work that God has called me to do. So I don't take it lightly, don't take it for granted. And so I take it as a privilege as well as an honor to work with the demographics that I work with. Amazing people that I partner with as well. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being here. I'm excited to get into the conversation. So my first question to you, and I may ask some questions outside of what I have planned as the conversation goes. So, but my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
That's a very great question. The mindset that I would say, it is having the attitude that you can do whatever you set out to do. So in layman's term, having an optimistic attitude. For me, it has been my key to success. I don't look at things as a failure or difficult to do, not if I'm involved. So I have that optimistic attitude. But in addition to having that, you also have to have persistency. And with the combination of both, there's nothing that you can't do. I don't care what you set your foot out to accomplish. If you have those two, those are the ingredients.
Okay. I really like that, being optimistic and persistent, because the journey sometimes provide you with setbacks and disappointments, and you may make mistakes. But if you can persist through all those that you may encounter on your journey, you are more likely to achieve the goal that you set out, and sometimes even more than you initially think when you just set out to pursue the goal. So I'm going to go straight into my next question, because I may piggyback on the persistent and optimistic mindset, our approach to life. What advice do you have for the men listening on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Well, with this political climate and with this environment that we are finding ourselves in, the only solution is a two-part solution for our people, our young men, to really be impactful. Number one, vote. That is the most powerful freedom that we can have, making a decision who's going to be in office. So I would encourage them to vote. And number two, it may not be considered by a lot of people as important, but I personally think it is volunteerism, because that allows you to network, that allows you to meet people, that allows you to give back to the community, that allows people to know who you are. So with a combination of voting and volunteerism, that is how you impact not only your community, but that's how you impact this country.
And I really appreciate that answer. But I'm going to do this follow-up pertaining to, say, voting and even volunteerism. But say voting, how would you convince the young people, especially that think their vote don't matter?
Well, first and foremost, we as a whole have to instill in young people the importance of having the right to vote.
Okay.
Now, there are many people that are disenfranchised, and I'm being one of them because of my past. I have a criminal record
Okay.
that has not allowed me to have that privilege to vote. And when you don't have that right to vote, that is something that's the most fundamental right to have. So it is important for me, especially people who with criminal justice involvement, to share with our young people the importance of being able to vote, because nothing happens until something happens, and it happens at the poll. So it is important that our young people know that their vote matters. No matter how minute they think it does matter, because one vote can make a difference.
Man, I appreciate that. I hope the young people that have the opportunity to listen can hear that confirmation that your vote matters and one vote can make a difference. So don't think because it's just you, because if everyone thinks that they don't matter or their vote don't matter, that may end up being 10,000 people. And that
Exactly.
10,000 could make a tremendous difference. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't even have to be just voting, but know that your impact, your input matters. And thanks for sharing that, because I think that was one of the first way someone shared. There are different ways. Everyone have different perspective. That's why these conversations are important, because all perspective give us the insight to look at different ways that we can make an impact. So I will go to my next question, and it ties close to what I just asked. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today?
Well, that is important because the cavalry is not coming to save us. We have to do that ourselves. When we have that mindset, then we can set the ball in motion. What we have to do as concerned citizens, as caring, as dependable men, we have to first and foremost be examples to our younger people, because younger people, they emulate what they see. You've heard that before. You are what you eat. Well, people emulate what they see. And so when you're setting that standard, that high bar, letting our young people know not only the importance of voting, but you also voting. And if you can't vote, in my situation, I can't vote, unfortunately, but it doesn't stop me from encouraging other people to do that. So we have to change the narrative. And the narrative begins with us, how we model ourselves, because people are watching us. And that's not just in the community, but that's also in our homes. That's how we move. And we need to move accordingly because people are watching.
And that is so important. And I can tell you, almost every conversation so far talks about be the example. And as you said, man, we don't know who's watching, but someone is always watching. But I know you said be the example, and I know you said you had been in the system where you're not able to vote. So just in case there are listeners that I know you said be the example, but what would you say to someone who may have doubts just because they have been disenfranchised and may lose hope? How would you encourage that person?
Well, I've learned to take lemons and make lemonade out of it. I've learned to adjust. And so for those who feel that they are disenfranchised, in all actuality, there's more than one way to skin the cat, as the old folks would say. So if we cannot go to the polls to vote, that does not stop us from getting other people to go to the polls to vote. It does not stop our voice for being able to tell others why it's important to vote. And trust me when I tell you that we're at that point to where if we do not vote, things are only going to get worse. We've already seen that happen. We see that happen with the U.S. Supreme Court making decisions. We see that happening with state laws. So it starts with voting locally, because that's where the change happens. And we must mobilize. We must energize. We must get out and get our people prepared for what's to come, and that is at the polls.
And I appreciate it. Listeners, are you listening? because I know Dr. Reddick just dropped some nuggets, and it's important that we do our part. We're thinking about making a difference or want to see change in our community. And again, it's not just for us, but for those coming behind us. So I hope you really receive that, and because we are the change, we must see ourselves as the change. So my next question to you, and I'm really looking forward to this question, response, I should say, who or what, or say what influenced you to pursue the path that you're on, or who inspired you to pursue what you're currently doing?
The person who actually influenced me was a young man. He was 17 years old at the time. I was serving time, federal prison for a nonviolent offense, and I happened to come across a newspaper, Charlotte Observer. And on the front page, there was a young man that the newspaper had been covering for over a year because they wanted to find out why was the high percentage of Black male students not succeeding in the classroom. Why was it that 50% of young Black men was not going to graduate on time? It pricked my heart after I read his story to know that he was raised by his grandmother, to know that his mother was strung out on crack cocaine and his father was absent in his life. It propelled me. It drew something out of me to say, look, you're in prison, but you don't have to, let that be your excuse from reaching out. So I reached out. I wrote a letter to the newspaper and I told them about my story. I told them that I was interested in, working with the young man, and I built a relationship with him. Although I never saw him, met him face to face, our communication was limited to telephone calls as well as letters. But I promised him if he graduated that we'll write a book together. And he did graduate. So my very first book, he's my co-author. There's No Danger in the Water, encouraging Black men to become mentors. But unfortunately, Korres Franklin was his name. He ended up getting killed by a Charlotte police officer a year before I came home. So that was a very hard pill for me to swallow. Someone who got me on the path that I'm on today, but I never got a chance to meet him.
Wow.
Only had a chance to communicate with him over the phone. So he was the young man that got me on the path that I'm on now. That's Korres Franklin.
Man, that's a powerful story right there, and inspiring and also heartfelt at the same time. Because, as you said, someone who got you to realize your purpose in life or the difference that you can make, and didn't get an opportunity to meet the person. But I can tell you, he did a great job and helping you to see beyond where you were at the time, to start making a difference in our community, because that's important. But I do understand the situation with all hand and stuff like that, but we still have to appreciate what happened in those moments or those short time, with the impact that he had and stuff like that. So that's inspiring. So my next question, and I hopefully I can get back to what you just shared. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
Well, unlike what we hear, on the media, I think that it gives a false narrative because, we always hear the negativity about young Black men on the news. They're being the last to graduate in far as number goes. They're being the highest number to drop out, to not have a job, to go to prison, to end up getting killed by police. I think that that's a false narrative. I think there's another side that we don't hear from the news media about the number of men that are enrolled in school, the number of men who are active in their children's lives, a number of men who are actually doing productive things in society and making a difference. So I think we have to be careful with what we see, because the propaganda, we can take and run with that, but we should also do our research. And it takes people such as yourself that will help make that difference. And so that's why I'm so elated to be a part of this project, because I think it starts with Black educators. We don't have a lot of Black educators, but to see someone like you, Dr. Cross, and I know this interview is really, in regards to me and my story, but I have to, divert it back to you. If it was not for individuals such as yourself, think about the number of children, the number of Black males that would not be touched.
Yeah.
So it is important. What I'm doing is important, but what you're doing is equally important because you're in a space where we don't have a lot of faces that looks like us. So it's important you take advantage of that. And so kudos to you for the work that you're doing. Not where you are now currently, but where you were before you got there.
Yes.
Extraordinary work. And that's why I'm impressed to be a part of this.
Man, I appreciate that. And I appreciate it. And because, as you said, it's needed work. And but you said something that is really, really important. Because when I just started this journey, that's what I believe, that Black men weren't as successful or going to college. So they make you think. And again, if a lot of young people, if they don't have the right guidance, they will believe that narrative. And if they believe that narrative, they fall prey to the false narrative, not realizing their potential. And not only that, too, I know you may have seen this for yourself, where young men are in a community, right? And they haven't done all they could have done, but they get an opportunity to go somewhere else. And then that same young man start doing excellent work. Then you realize you have to now question what had caused him not to in the beginning. So you are right, because they may have first believed the false narrative about themselves. So because they believe it, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy until someone else see that person and say, you know what, man, I believe in you. I believe you can do great. So that's important. And I know you talk about mentorship. And so what advice would you, and I don't have that as a question, but I know it's a part of your bio. What advice would you give Black men, just in general, about mentoring the next generation?
Well, let me begin by simply saying this. When it comes down to crisis in our community, the first people on the scene are our white brothers and sisters. When it comes down to giving, the first people who are giving are our white brothers and sisters. When it comes down to being able to be impactful in our community, a lot of times it's people that don't look like us. That has to change because it's our village.
Yeah.
And as I stated before, the cavalry is not coming to save us. We must understand that. We must understand that this is not a government responsibility. It is our responsibility. It's our community. These are our sons. And I don't even use the slogan, save our sons. I use the slogan, we need to strengthen our sons. Because if you strengthen them, they learn to save themselves. So we can't keep saving. We have to learn to strengthen. But again, it's the narrative. So we as Black men, we have to volunteer to become mentors. And it's not difficult. 1 hour a week, 4 hours a month can make a great difference. I'm proud to say that I'm a team captain for the All Pro Dads Fatherhood Program that was started a number of years ago. And it's a program that's in 42 states. And they're in schools all across the country, thanks to Tony Dungeon. And this program teaches that all it takes is 1 minute. 1 minute a day to be able to say something positive to a young man. It takes 1 minute a day to be able to say something encouraging. That goes a long ways. So as mentors, there's a lot that we can do. We don't just have to spend money. We don't just have to spend a lot of time talking. A lot of time is listening, actively listening, which is part of mentoring.
Oh man, that is powerful. You hear, listeners, it doesn't have to be an entire hour. Just say something positive. You never know what that positive message will do to the person on the receiving end. We have a job to do. It's our obligation to make a difference in the world, or in our world, our immediate environment. And we have to see the value in sharing what we know with others. So I know you share a lot of stuff that happen and help you to get on the path. So I'm also equally looking forward to asking this question and the response. What was a pivotal moment in your life? I know you shared the story with the young man when you read it. Is there another pivotal moment in your life that give you perspective that really change how you go about living and or do things?
Yes, it was another pivotal moment or epiphany, if you will. One day, man, I just woke up in prison and just heard a lot of chaos, just watching a lot of buffoonery, listening to crazy conversations. And I just asked myself, what am I doing here? I felt like I was out of place. And I felt like I got to the point to where I was just tired. And I asked that question, what are you doing here? I mean, just look at what's around you. You don't even fit into this place. And I just started preparing from that day forward. Everything I did was not to do time, it was to invest time. And I invested in a future that I didn't even see, but I believed. I'm a man of faith. So I believed that if I prepared every day while I was in the system, that it will pay off eventually. And here I am today. It paid off great dividends because I invested my time. I did not waste it. And so that was my epiphany. I just got tired and I just said, hey, what are you doing? Why are you here? I haven't looked back since.
That is a great or even a defining moment. Sometimes we don't need to wait for an incident, but start asking ourselves, pertaining to what you just said, ask ourselves, what are we doing here, or what can we do from here going forward? And if we really ask ourselves those questions, our attitude will change, our behavior will change, our perspective will change. So I really appreciate you sharing that response, because sometimes we don't think we can and redirect ourselves. Sometimes we're looking for incidents outside of ourselves for redirection. I know that we can start asking those questions. So I really, really appreciate that. And I hope the listeners, you don't have to wait for something to happen. You don't have to wait for someone to tell you or ask you. Sometimes the question or the redirection is supposed to come from you.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate. I know that you were going to say something profound with that question. So, and that's important as we go forward, because sometimes, man, we as people looking for outside from the outside to say something to us that we need to say to ourselves to change our life and direction or the possibilities. So I really appreciate that. So my next question to you, and this one is, I think it's a great question as well. What life lessons have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
Well, there were actually several, but I can just sum it up. There were roadblocks that prohibited me from getting to the level of success where I'm at today. Those roadblocks, I think anyone that was going down the path that I went down can identify with these roadblocks. And I'll just only give you a few. One was everybody else is doing it. That was a roadblock. That was my justifying of doing what I was doing. The other roadblock was I never get caught. I always felt I was smarter than the next person. The third roadblock was they owe it to me. They owe this to me. And those roadblocks, I didn't realize it until I started self-reflection. I didn't realize it until I took self-inventory. So I had to get past those roadblocks, those barriers. And I think the most crucial part that brought tears to my eyes was an exercise that we did that was called the Johari window. And it's a window with 4 window panes. The first window pane, you stand up at the chalk of the whiteboard, and in that first window pane, you write down all of the great things about yourself. And so I wrote down all these different things. And then when I got to the second window pane, the individuals that were in the audience had to tell me what they saw in me from the outside, and to write down the things that they say they saw: arrogance, lack of respect, or intolerance. And to write those things down and not being able to respond, because that's part of the exercise. There was a lot of pain because I couldn't see those things. But that was another moment, because so many times you can't see things that other people see. And sometimes you just have to take those moments to really build. And I wanted to become better. I didn't want to get bitter. So I had to take that and I had to be able to build off of that. And so those are the 2 things: roadblocks and that Johari window exercise.
That's powerful. Sometimes, yeah, you're right. Sometimes some of the things that we may need to change, we may need to get that response from someone because we don't always see some of the things that we need to change. So I really appreciate that. I'm getting closer to the end of the question, but I want to ask about the social learning advocacy, because I know that's a big thing now, especially when the pandemic happens, because there are certain things that educators or some educators weren't aware of, especially when it comes to our kids and stuff like that. So what light can you shed on the social emotional learning?
Well, everything is centered around social emotional learning. When you have a child or individual who has been traumatized, you can't reach or teach that individual the same way you would teach someone else. So you have to, number one, be able to identify those individuals. Sometimes they need some encouragement. And so that's why it's important for us to be able to identify this. And that became very big with me because I noticed that the number of students that were having problems with school attendance, they were having problems with behavior issues in the classroom, and they were not doing well in the student achievement department. They were young Black boys. And these boys, unless you talked to them, you wouldn't know what they experienced when they went home. And they were bringing it to the classroom. And to compound, to make things worse, the teachers did not use those techniques to be able to identify them. In fact, they automatically looked at them as being troublemakers. So they had this attitude, you don't care, I don't care, and this is how it is. And so I became an advocate for social emotional learning because I wanted to teach that to the teachers and also be able to show them how to effectively reach our young people in the classroom, and it works.
Yes, I think more institutions need to become knowledgeable, or the educators need to become knowledgeable, especially dealing with trauma. Even today, I had a conversation with a student, and that's what the student said. It's the trauma of all the things that they experience in their community. How will they deal with it being in this new environment? They wanted to leave, but the thoughts do come back to their mind, and they really want to know if the people around them care about them. And that's one thing I try my very best to do. Not say I'm a lot really knowledgeable about social emotional learning in words of context, where I understand the language and stuff like that, but I know the importance of showing people that I care. So that's the part that I really emphasize when I try to demonstrate that. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and I hope we have some educators here listening and realize the importance. You may can reach out to Dr. Reddick to gain more insights on how to, because he's an advocate for social emotional learning, which is important, especially if you're teaching kids or students that have gone through different things that can traumatize them and have them to have doubt about themselves. So I really appreciate that, and we have to approach serving our future generation the best way that we can if we're going to have them become the best version of themselves. So I do appreciate that. But before I get to the last question, I want to ask, where can the listeners find you and help support your work to make a difference? I will post it somewhere here so they can get the link, of course. But I want you to share with them, where can they find your work and how can they support you with what you're doing, because that's important and you're doing important work.
Well, thank you very much. For all of you that are listening, it is very easy to find me. You can find me on several social media platforms. I'm on LinkedIn under Dr. Belay D. Reddick. I'm also on Instagram under Dr. Belay D. Reddick. And I'm also on Twitter under Dr. Belay D. Reddick. So I want to encourage you to follow me. And if you need someone to come into your school to speak with young people, or even some of the staff on leadership or diversity, equity, and inclusion, I am a top tier speaker for SHRM, which stands for Society Human Resource Management, which is the largest HR professional association in the world. So I love to go in and talk about racial equity. And it's very important we have these conversations. And I'm also an author, and I have my latest book, Teaching and Coaching Values in the Classroom. So I encourage you to get that book. It's a very good book, especially if you're mentoring young Black men.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. I will say I'm still waiting to get my books, but I need to make sure I have all your books amongst my collection. So when I'm doing some work, I can actually go and get some nuggets out of it to share in whatever I'm doing. But I'm going to do my best to continue sharing the work and to share what you're doing. And hopefully, we can continue this conversation. I don't want this to be our only conversation. As I told the other interviewees, I want to continue having these conversations to continue making a difference community. So with getting that out of the way, know where we can reach you. I have one question, final question that I want to ask, and is what impact do you want to have on the world?
Well, I believe that we are the change that we want the world to be, or at least we should be the change that we want the world to be. And that's what my motto is. I am the change. I am the change agent. And my world may not be where you are, but where I am today. And so I want to encourage everyone who's listening to be the change that you want the world to be, right where you are, and you can make the difference.
Man, thank you very much. As listeners, you can hear we have to be the change that we want to see. And, we all can make a difference and we all can make an impact. And again, thanks, Dr. Reddick, for being here for this conversation. And again, this is the Black Male Impact, where change are inspired, where changes are inspired. Dr. Reddick, thanks for being here with us. And I'm
Thank you for having me.
Yes, looking forward for the next conversation. If you haven't subscribed and if you haven't liking and sharing and supporting, please do so. We have a lot more conversations to share with you. And again, thanks for being here.
Thank you.